Hi there. Good to see you. Glad you decided to join us today. Tell you what, we're going to tell some stories, we're going to laugh a little, learn something. So I'm going to go freshen up my tea, so just come on up here and join us on the porch. You know, I love telling stories, and Tom, you couldn't have a better neighbor because you're always willing to come by and listen to one of them. And I was thinking the other day about, back when I got started in politics a little bit, about forward 15 or so years, it's about 2000, and I got to go to China with then Governor Frank O'Bannon and His Excellency, the ambassador to Singapore, the plenipotentiary, I think that's how you pronounce that, of the United States, Bob Orr. Now, you know, Bob Orr was governor and you and I were young guys. And both times I ran for governor, it was never lost on me the way Bob Orr looked. He looked like an Indiana version of Joe DiMaggio. You know, about 6'1", 6'2", white, beautiful white hair, dressed immaculate. And on a good day, I couldn't look like Governor Orr. But we were touring around, and we were sitting on the back of the bus, Governor Orr and I were, and I just said to him, I said, I remember when I was in law school and in the early 80s, Ronald Reagan came and spoke at the State House. And I said, what do you remember about it? And he always called me Brother Greg, and he said, Brother Greg, that's a favorite story. He said, we got called from the White House that President Reagan was wanting to go around the country and talk. So he decided to come and address the Indiana General Assembly. They did it at night, and he said, I was honored and elated, but he said I needed to do something, and I was told I'd get 15 minutes with the president before he talked in what was the Speaker's office, which is what later became mine. So Governor Orr said, you know, I called 2 or 3 people and asked them all about President Reagan. They said, I'll tell you what, he's from California, you know, and there's nothing he likes better than a tall glass of fresh orange juice. So Bob said, I gave somebody on the staff $10 and sent them over to the old Amalia's grocery store to buy some fresh squeezed orange juice. He said, they bring it back, we put it in like a champagne bucket, put ice on it, set it up there. So he said, I go up to the Speaker's office and he's wrapping up, getting ready to give his speech, and the door opens up, and right there, larger than life, President Reagan. And he said, I stood up, put my hand out, and I said, Mr. President, good to see you. And he said, Governor, good to see you. And he said, we've got, and he points to the table, and here's that orange juice in that champagne bucket. President Reagan said, oh, Governor, thank you. And he went over and dipped his hands in that bucket, pulling that ice up, getting his hands good and wet. And he says, oh, I needed that. And he slicked his hair back. So, you know, that's one of those uses for orange juice that I don't think Anita Bryant would have objected to, but it wasn't what it was originally planned. Well, I'm glad it's not every day that I get somebody like Robert Vane, the great communicator, here on the porch, and you've got your Ronald Wilson Reagan. I want you to know that I even know the middle name. Tell me what his favorite quote was that you can remember, that you won't make up. And if I've caught you off guard, ask me.
About Democrats, about Republicans?
Yeah, because I'm fishing for something. He made a great quote.
He had a great quote in response to a question from Sam Donaldson during a press conference when the president was basically kind of blaming the Democrats in Congress for inflation and high unemployment. And Sam Donaldson said, well, don't you deserve some of the blame? And without missing a beat, Ronald Reagan said, yes, I do, because for many years I was a Democrat. That's my favorite.
Well, what I always remember him saying, and he could just boom. Of course, I remember him telling Walter Mondale that he would not make his youth and inexperience an issue. But when asked why he left the Democrat Party, and I mean it was a zinger, I didn't like it as a Democrat, but he said, oh, I didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left me.
And that's a post-McGovern, sort of post-Vietnam.
Yeah.
My other favorite one, very quickly, and you can actually find it on YouTube, is he was speaking in Germany after his assassination attempt. And someone popped a balloon or something, and he was reading his remarks, and without missing a beat, as soon as the balloon popped and made kind of like a gunshot noise, President Reagan goes, "Miss me." I'll send it to you.
I need to, yeah, that, unbelievable.
You should notice that I am also...
And you're wearing, tell us about the POW, Vietnam POW era.
Well, in the spirit of bipartisanship, which I know is important to you, I am wearing my Joseph Kernan POW bracelet. He was shot down May 7th, 1972, and I bought this 20-some years ago and used to wear it when I went to go work for your friend Murray Clark at the Indiana Republican Party, and never had anyone tell me I couldn't wear it. They all thought the world of Governor Kernan, and he actually wore it for me one night at a trivia contest at the Golden Ace and gave me a big handshake and a little bit of a hug afterward, and he goes, "I didn't expect that." And I'm lucky he wore it. I also have a John McCain POW bracelet, and Senator McCain wore that one night.
Really?
He was here in Indianapolis for a fundraiser.
Well, now, and you are a veteran, and your business is called Veteran Strategies.
Yes, sir.
Now, I know you do communications, and we're going to come back because I want to talk about what communications mean today with Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. But you also help veterans get in business, don't you?
I do. I do as much as I can to be helpful. There are a lot of veterans who want to be entrepreneurs. There's a lot of veterans who come out not really sure what to do. My son Joshua did 2 tours in Afghanistan and hurt his back so badly on a second tour that he couldn't stay in the military. So he looked around for a little bit and struggled trying to find something. He's found something he likes, so we're very happy there. But you know, there's so much structure in the military world, and then you come out and you know, it's easy to get lost if you want, but I was the head of Mike Pence's Veteran Affairs Policy Team in 2012, and we did some significant recommendations, one of which was a 3% goal on veteran business for state procurement, which then Governor Pence thankfully signed into law. And so there's lots of, Indiana at the time had the 4th largest National Guard in the country, which means we're punching way above our weight. Okay. And so if there's anything that I can do for veterans, I usually just do it for free because I don't charge them.
Well, that's interesting. And you mentioned, you know, for some of our neighbors, you and I both embody, you can have very different political views, but it still doesn't have to interfere with friendship. I think the fancy word civility, but we seem to have lost that in this country.
I get along with anyone who wants to get along with me.
Well,
I think that you are the same way. Do you want to get along with me? We'll get along. If you don't want to get along with me, then I have what's called East Side Alzheimer's, because I was born on the east side of Indianapolis, and East Side Alzheimer's is defined as forgetting everything but your grudges.
Ooh, I kind of like that. Now, if you're an East Sider, got to ask you, the Steer Inn.
Oh yeah, it's owned by a friend of mine, Casey Kerr.
Really?
We grew up together. He went Cecina, class of '86, and I was a Howe High School, class of '86. A Howe Hornet.
Howe Hornet. Wow.
Fred Klipsch is a Howe Hornet, if you know Fred. Yeah,
I don't know Fred. Fred doesn't mingle down at my level, but I know who he is. Well, tell me, with you, and I know you were like Mayor Ballard's press secretary also, and you're what we would call, as a positive term, a Republican operative.
Correct.
So tell me, how has communications changed for you in the last 10, 15 years, 20 years? Pick the time frame, because I know it's had to change.
Immediacy. That would be number one. Credibility, which used to be sort of the rock, paper, and scissors of effective communication. It's not as important as it used to be because of social media, but in a lot of ways it's still just as important when it comes to written or spoken communications, like on TV or here on the porch. And actually I'm looking around, where's Barney and Aunt Bee and Andy and Opie? I want to see some of my peeps.
We're having the Potato Queen Festival today here in town, and they're in there helping with it. I forget whose turn it is to be the
Goober?
be the queen. Yeah. Well, you know, when you talked about immediacy, I mean, you just have people live on that phone and are tweeting constantly, and I know that's the trend among particularly young politicians. But boy, I think my career would have ended years
Well,
ago.
think about credibility, right? So in January of '61, Dwight Eisenhower, former five-star general, President of the United States, gives a speech lamenting the influence or warning of the influence of what he termed the military-industrial complex. Now, we still remember that speech 60 years later, not necessarily because he was right or wrong in one way or the other. You could make an argument either way, but because he was a five-star general. And if Adlai Stevenson, who Eisenhower defeated both in '52 and '56, had given that speech, it wouldn't have resonated so much because he didn't have the same career. So when you start out with credibility and communicate effectively, it's memorable and it can change people's minds. It happens all the time. Barack Obama talking about the civil rights movement is another one. Lots of examples.
Well, that credibility is something that I want to follow up with you on after this. Robert, you as the great communicator, the whole idea of credibility, what do we do to get people to start reading? I look at Fox News every day. I'm a Democrat. I look at CNN. I try to read and get headlines and glean stories of everything because both sides, the extremes in both sides are driving things. What do we do to get credibility back where people believe the media?
Well, first thing I should say is that the great communicator label, which I kind of just happened to be wearing the Ronald Reagan shirt today, was one that very kindly the late, great, and much missed Matt Tully from the Indianapolis Star called me that one time, which was very kind of him. You know, it's interesting. We all have political muscle memory. And when we want to be educated or learn things, we tend to go back to the people who made us think in the first place. And sometimes I wish people would have conversations. One of the reasons, for example, my podcast, Leaders and Legends, I don't call it a Republican podcast. I'm a Republican who has a podcast. And you've consented to be a guest. I've had plenty of Democrats on, whether it's Evan Bayh or whatever.
Was I a leader or a legend?
Both.
Oh, okay.
You're a leader among legends is what we say. Jim Shella calls you that, among many other things.
A giant in my own mind.
But part of that is because I want to hear from other folks. And, you know, I just wish people would read more and observe people's good behavior more. Because, you know, if you're only going to be friends with people who think like you do and love like you do and worship like you do, then your life's not going to be very exciting. It's going to miss a bit of fulfillment.
Yeah, that's well said. I can't add a thing to that. That is beautiful. You use the term way back. I know you like to ride bicycles, and you and I both have a lot to do. We both do a lot of weightlifting. Mine's just getting up and moving, but I know you work out. You have a master's degree in history, in medieval history. Last October, Lisa and I went to Bayeux, France,
with the tapestry.
and saw the tapestry.
Bayeux Tapestry, about William the Conqueror.
William the Conqueror, and it was, you know, just went on and on and on. Beautiful. Tell me what era of the medieval history?
Was that the trip when you called me that one time I was on my bike and you said, give me some books to read because I'm going to be on a travel?
Yes.
You know, the medieval period is so instructive and it's so determinant in many ways. Not only is it incredibly popular and almost ubiquitous in popular culture, right? Because you have Game of Thrones and Braveheart movies, but I mean, the Middle Age, Harry Potter, for example, is just this, it's everywhere, and it's still very inspiring. It's underrated in terms of technology, and I mean, I'm not wearing a watch, but clocks were invented, and so much of what we do today, a lot of the territorial conflicts in Europe are related to something that happened, you know, hundreds of years ago. So my particular research was on a guy named Sir Thomas Erpingham, who was the head of the commander of the archers at the Battle of Agincourt on October 25th, 1415. He served under Henry V. So if you read Shakespeare's Henry V, Erpingham was still such a big figure that when Shakespeare wrote the play, Erpingham is in by name. Henry V says something like, "There's my good friend Erpingham, you need a hat for your bald head," or something like that. And what happens is, when you study the Middle Ages, you really get a better understanding of a lot of the conflicts that have come since then, and why history can get determined. I'll tell you a quick story, a quick historical anecdote. I'll make it very quick. So when the Black Plague hit in the 14th century, it took them a while to kind of try to figure out what the problem was, what was the cause. So in typical sort of medieval mindset, in a lot of ways, they blamed it on Jewish people and the merchants because it was coming through the cities like Venice, the merchant cities. So a lot of the heads of these city-states, not only in Italy but in other places, kicked the Jewish people out of the cities, out of the towns, forced them to move inland, thinking that that would help in the Black Death, as it was called. It didn't. But 600 years later, when Adolf Hitler starts the final solution, that's why there's this gigantic pocket of Jewish people in Eastern Europe in the middle of the continent, because hundreds of years earlier they got pushed out of the merchant towns.
Did not know that. I did. I was always aware that that they were always blaming everything in the Middle Ages on the Jewish population. But I read a great book. We always, used to call it the Dark Ages, which is so wrong. But the Byzantine Empire flourished and went like this, while the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 AD, and it went like that. So there was a lot of progress went on.
And Edward I, who's Longshanks in the movie Braveheart, he borrowed in the late 13th century, he borrowed a bunch of money from the Jews, from the Jewish population and the bankers to finance his wars in France. And then when he didn't want to pay him, he just kicked him out.
Well, I'm glad you've been here. I want you to stay. We're going to have some special music here by my buddies Andy and Ben, so just stay with us here for a few more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
My longtime friend Maya Michelson with me. She's the executive director of the Indiana Arts Commission, and she's going to tell us about our musicians today. Maya, glad you're here.
Thanks, John. I want to introduce you to Ben Jackson. Ben's a doctoral student in the Jacobs School of Music in Bloomington, and Andy Ruff's a native-born Hoosier, singer-songwriter, former city council member. And the connection between these two guys is Ben plays in the Hellbenders, which is Andy's son Hank's backing band. So take it away, guys.
Last night I didn't dream about you like I have dreamed about you. Seems like every night since you've been gone. And today I didn't start out drinking, but I start out thinking it helped me face the old gray dawn. I thought even the passing time couldn't heal this heart of mine. Oh, but maybe I've been wrong. 'Cause last night I didn't dream about you like I have dreamed about you. Seems like every night since you've been gone. There was a letter for you in the mail again. They still come every now and then. And up to now, it would always make me cry. But today, not a single tear. I wish you'd let them all know now you don't live here. I didn't even wonder what was inside. I thought even the passing time couldn't heal this heart of mine. Oh, but maybe I've been wrong. 'Cause last night I didn't dream about you like I have dreamed about you. Seems like every night since you've been gone. Daytime, it's about time, but better late than never.
Thank you for joining us on the porch today. Robert, thank you, and we'll look forward to your podcast, which is?
Leaders and Legends.
Thank you very much. Maya, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate that. And to my musicians, the one and only Andy and Ben. Ben, where's home? I hadn't got to ask you.
Home for me is in Sikeston, Missouri, down in the Boot Heel.
Home of the throat roll.
That's
that same
it.
Sikeston where you go in and they throw the biscuit at you and they have sorghum and okra. Oh, been there. Good. Andy, tell us about this last song.
Well, you know, California, Texas, Alabama, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, they got all the good songs. And one day I decided, well, I'll just write one for us Hoosiers. It's called Hey, Indiana.
Well, before you do that, I want everybody to remember, life gets pretty tough. It's an imperfect world. And if you see someone this week and they look like they're having a bad day, give them a smile. Maybe the only one they get.
Hey, hey, Indiana, you're calling me a lonesome country song. It's like a recurring dream of mine, another place, another time, thinking that I'm gonna find what I think I'm looking for. Through the dirty window, the morning light disappears, another restless night. Dreams that now don't put up a fight slip out under the door. Hey, hey, Indiana, I'm on my way. Well, I'm coming home. Hey, hey, Indiana, you're calling me like a lonesome country song. Seattle, Nashville, Minneapolis, Austin, New Orleans, faces that I've known in all those places that I've seen. Am I walking softly now, or am I running free? Or is the ground I'm standing on just moving under me? Hey, hey, Indiana, I'm on my way. Well, I'm a-coming home. Hey, hey, Indiana, you're calling me like a lonesome country song. write it down, but my thoughts turn back faster than my world is turning around. There are some things that you think, and there are some things that you know. I think I'll put on my walking shoes and start walking down the road. Hey, hey, Indiana, I'm on my way. Yeah, I'm coming home. Hey, hey, Indiana.
You got a story, I'd like to hear it. Morning glories, boats on the river. Sit a spell, sing a tune to yourself, and I'll join you on the porch. On the porch means everything.